Pace, will you be building your brackets ahead of the tournament based on Ryan's data and research and some of the work? Welcome to another episode of Behind the Lines, the only sports betting podcast purifying the sports betting industry. Remember to like, download, subscribe, follow us on all the socials at InPlayLive. And we have a special promo code for you if you want to see what the community is all about. Take a look on the inside. That is Behind the Lines, all caps. That special promo code for you to join our amazing, sophisticated sports betting community. All right, on today's show, Apple Sports app. Is it the Apple Sports app? Apple Sports app? I don't know. We'll play with names a little bit. Saturday Night Live nails it with a sports betting culture commentary, and certified bracketology professor Ryan Hammer on the show. Really cool interview with him. Stay tuned for that. But first, I'm your host, Shane Mercer. That guy over there, Andrew Pace, the founder of InPlayLive. And Pace, this is a big announcement from Apple, launching the Apple Sports app. It looks like it has a lot of potential to change the way we do things.
Does it?
I think on the surface it does, and I think it does just because it's Apple, right? Here we are having one of the biggest technology companies offering us real-time data. I think that when they say it's real-time, I believe them. It's the kind of thing where I don't think they would say it if they didn't feel like they had the technology to provide that data at that speed and at the volume that they say they're going to be, because they're basically saying, hey, we're going to have every single sport here for you.
Right. And what's interesting is one of the storylines we've followed throughout the football season was BetVision and BetGenius. And when I was on a call with them, which we haven't spoken about on this podcast, I actually just asked them, like, hey guys, like, I'm curious about your business from the standpoint of you guys offering this really great sports feed of the NFL and a couple of other sports. What does it mean for you when Amazon, when, CBS, when Fox, when Apple, whomever it may be, offers the same low latency feed in real time? And as a technology business, it is a little scary to see how quickly a big player can just go bang and really one up you or wipe you out. And I always think there's so many examples over the course of time, but I think back to the craze of Snapchat, social media platform, and everyone's using Snapchat, and they've got these cool, unique social media features that not a lot of other people are using. And then almost overnight, Instagram adds those features, and it's like, is Snapchat still around? Yeah, it is. Is it worth something? Sure. Yeah. But I mean, I really don't see a lot of people that use it anymore. So when I see Apple Sports, I think, ESPN, Score, even though those are huge companies, I have no idea if they're better, but Apple just does a really good job with a lot of the things that they do put forward. So, like, I'm just clicking into the NBA tonight. We're shooting this on Monday. It airs on a Wednesday. The Raptors are playing the Pacers tonight, so I've got information on the money line, the spread, the totals. They're all there and listed. I don't know who is powering those lines, but one of the things that I really like is they've got the Western and Eastern Conference standings laid out in front of me here. Now, from a user standpoint, I am not familiar yet with actually using this when the games are on. So I think that's something we're going to have to comment on in a future episode. I'm sure some of our listeners have already started using it in some capacity or another. But kind of like what you said, Shane, you're excited because it's Apple. Well, you just look, and I just keep getting a little bit more and more excited about the thought of getting rid of my 6 coaxial cable boxes and just being able to get information in live sports feeds in real time. So yeah, definitely something that is exciting. And as a longtime Apple shareholder and user of their products, they never have to question whether or not they get my support.
Yeah. And, I'm just really excited. Like, you brought up ESPN and you brought up the Score. Like, that was the first one that came to mind, was the Score for me personally, because I think that's the one I probably use most frequently when I'm trying to get a piece of data on a game really fast, especially something that's happening live. And I find that, they've often been able to give that information. But I'm thinking, wow, if now Apple's entering this space, and they're going to do it better than them, and they probably have the capability to do it better than them. Wow, what a game changer there. And then I guess, my next thought turns to, are they going to create a betting app? Is there going to be the Apple Sportsbook? Right. I
Right.
mean, maybe, I don't know, but that's, something to think about, I guess, on their side. And if they did, I wonder what that might look like and how they might treat their customers. So,
right. And we know they already entered the space with Friday Night Baseball. Like they took over those Friday Night Baseball games, and those feeds, in the grand scheme of things, they weren't amazing, but they were okay. From like a latency standpoint, I watched a couple games, Friday night games on the Apple app there, for the MLB. But Shane, what's interesting, we actually have never spoken about this on Behind the Lines, but it's something that we've talked about in relation to odds providers. So we talk about the odds providers, being what's under the hood of several different sports books. Well, what comes with that is the betting feeds that the odds providers and the sports books use. So you might have one betting company, again, like BetGenius, who offers that BetVision product, and they are supplying the real-time data to not one or two, but potentially dozens of sports books at the same time. So Shane, we see this all the time as sports bettors, where that data changes something in a game, whether it's a wrong score, a player that hit a 3 that was actually a 2 and the books haven't corrected it yet, but on the floor it is corrected. The time on the clock, potentially sometimes in a hockey game, there might be 42 seconds left on all the books, but there's actually 52 seconds left on the ice. Might not be that significant of an example. But are we going to have an independent data provider now that we can become more reliable on? Because Apple is not using the other companies' data. They are not doing that. So that to me is where I go, okay, how accurate is this? How fast is it? And how credible is it compared to some of those other spots? Because I've been on both sides of that. I've been a recreational bettor on the public side, where I used wrong information to think I was gaining an edge and made a really bad bet as a result of it. And then I've also been in the spot where I have the correct information, which is more probable now than not. I have the correct information. I'm able to potentially gain an edge from having that information. The books will obviously have access to a lot of this similar technology and use it over time, but still, up-to-date information is paramount.
Yeah, and with all of that, with this sort of leveraging of technology that they're going to be able to do, and this idea that they wouldn't use an outside provider, and sort of go and pay an odds provider to provide them with data, because they're going to be doing it on their own, comes the idea, well, what if they were to launch a sports book? What would that sports book look like? And I think that they would be incentivized to say, you know what, we're going to go with a sharp model book, because hey, this isn't going to be our main revenue source. This is just something we're doing on the side, and if it turns a small, a very sort of small margin in terms of profits, but we can gather a lot of people to it, it might be worth it. I don't know. It's something, it's a hypothetical, of course, and I'm just dreaming over here, but I'm enjoying the dream. so
Right on.
Apple, bring it to us. Bring us a sharp book, Apple.
Right on.
All right, with that, and books and everything else, we saw something this weekend. So Pace, I was betting on Saturday throughout the day, and oftentimes, whether it's the weekend or not, I like to unwind at the end of the night, because sports betting, live sports betting, it's a big drain on the brain, or watching lines. It's so at the end of the night, I like to throw on something mindless on TV. Usually, it's some kind of comedy or something, just something to make me laugh, and something I can just zone out to and not think much about, right? And so on Saturdays, that tends to be Saturday Night Live. And so this past Saturday, I'm wrapping up the day, and I'm like, oh, what am I gonna watch here? And Saturday Night Live is on. It was a little bit later, but I'm restarting it, and I got to watch this, which was just, honestly, to me, it just nailed it as a commentary on the state of sports betting culture in North America. So why don't I go ahead and play that for everybody here, and let's just check it out, because this is just awesome. All right, Rock Bottom Kings. Pace, would you bet on Rock Bottom Kings?
Oh, geez. I think they do a great job of calling the industry out, because it is a joke and it's funny, but at the end of the day, they are doing that specifically because of all the shit that we see on TV. the explosions, making it look easy, all that kind of stuff, and then trying to make it seem like they care by saying, "Oh, it's serious" or whatever. Call the gambling helpline. Then they say you can bet on that as well. Is really the punch there. I mean, I think it's a great call out of the industry. When I watched it, I'm like, this is like spot on from the standpoint of making like the social trends of making a mockery of actual gambling problems, which we've seen in the comments, and some of the things that can happen under a certain type of a reel, creating awareness for someone that has, a problem gambling story. And then of course all the betting and how easy it's supposed to be with these ads.
Yeah, it's just an incredible piece of satire that just nails different elements of the culture right now when it comes to sports betting in North America. Like you said, you got the sports books with their with the ads that are everywhere that make it look super easy and exciting. And then that's culture that I think we touched on last week about don't give up. Oh, you keep making your parlays, right? Like you're a quitter if you stop, right? And all of that kind of stuff, right? And it's really kind of getting at that idea that, hey, look what happens when you don't stop, right? And when you keep up with the problem gambling, all these things can happen. And hey, then exactly nailing it with the punchline of, let's bet on that now, right? And it's like, and also this idea too that friends end up perhaps getting pitted against each other when it comes to sports betting, right? And you talk, you could be there with your friend and, oh, I'm going to take, team A tonight. No, I think team B. And you end up rooting for the other person's loss, and that kind of thing happens. And it's a really kind of negative aspect of the sports betting culture, at least in terms of how it's developing so far in North America. And I also think, the fact that they're touching on it and hitting it as hard as the way they did really sort of speaks to this idea that maybe we're reaching a point of critical mass, in terms of market saturation of sports betting just generally, and how it is everywhere now. And you almost can't escape it. Anyway, I thought it was just perfect in terms of how they did it. So, kudos to SNL and for making me laugh last night and giving us a little content here for the show.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. With that, we have a pretty cool guest on to talk college basketball in pace. When people start listening to this, it'll be the end of February, and they may be listening to it on the first day of March. And let's just call it March is here, right? It's just about to be March Madness time. And I know the team at In Play Live is really excited for that. And the guy we have on here, really, really interesting in terms of what he's doing, and why, and how it can, help influence some decision making. And I think it's really fascinating. So with that, here is Ryan Hammer, certified bracketologist, as I keep calling him, and we'll call him again. Let's roll that interview. Ryan Hammer, a certified bracketologist, a guy studying all things NCAA hoops. Welcome to the show, Ryan. Great to have you.
I appreciate y'all for bringing me on. It's been good.
Hey, really, really excited to have you talk college hoops. We are huge fans of college hoops at In Play Live. First, I just want to ask you, give us a sense of your work. How exactly would you describe it? What do you do?
It's a great question. It's probably too much, but anything from most people see a lot of analytic breakdowns on team stats and team stuff and rankings and observations and analysis on team stuff, March Madness tournament, bracketology. But there's also a lot of like player evaluation. I do a lot of NBA draft stuff, especially as the tournament goes on further and post-tournament into the draft process throughout the summer and all. So the college, trying to bridge the gap between college and NBA and kind of hitting as much as I can in that sense. But it's a wide range, and like I said, probably too wide for my mental stamina.
I actually, Shane, sorry, I actually haven't seen anyone online that posts as educational of content as college hoops as you do. And
I appreciate it.
I actually thought about your page when I was looking at some of your stuff that I'd come across, and I was like, is there anyone in this world that evaluates college hoops as much as this dude?
No,
So,
I appreciate it.
Do you know anyone else like you that does this stuff?
There's tons of people that do stuff under the radar and all. I think highly of myself and what I do, and I like what I do, and everything I put out is for a reason, obviously. I don't think there's anyone like me that does, like I said, the combination of what I do and like the depth analysis and visuals and all that together. That being said, there are people who do things better than I do and do things worse and whatever, and different things that I don't touch. So it just depends. I think it's a personal preference type thing.
So Ryan, I've pulled up a screenshot here and just sharing for all of our audience out there. So if you're just listening on the pod, you might want to go and watch the YouTube version to get a sense, or at least go check out Ryan on Twitter. That's at RyanHammer09, and he's also on Instagram, RyanHammer9. But Ryan, give us a sense of exactly what it is we're looking at here. This is the so your posting goes with the Power 30 comes the metric rank comparison with CBB Analytics. And you've got some agree and disagree. So you've got some issues that you're taking here with what their rankings are versus yours. But give us a sense of what is this metric rank? How did you create it? What is it exactly?
Yeah, so every week I do a Power 30 from, I don't know what date season starts, November, middle of November when the season starts, Power 30 of me power ranking teams. I update it every single Monday, once a week, kind of like the AP poll does. I like to think I'm better than the AP poll, which is not a good standard because that's easy, but I like to, it's a lot of eye test, and like, yes, there's resume things behind it where do teams rank in some metrics and in the net and KenPom and all these different things. But it's a lot of eye testing. So this, with partnering with CBB Analytics, a great data site, I basically put a side-by-side view of their top 30 in adjusted net rating and my top 30 in a power ranking. So a lot of times we talk about a million things in here, but it basically just looks about the differences and agreements from what not just my power ranking, but most consensus power rankings look like versus what the numbers and data actually say. Me and every other person doing a power ranking don't fully agree on everything, but like USF is obviously not going to be loved by the numbers because of their early season start and their woes there. But everyone doing a power ranking now has to include them because they're playing so well. So there's a lot of differences like that, but I think it's just really interesting. We thought about it with CBB Analytics a few weeks ago, actually, to start doing this. It's like, it'd be a great look to show people like, hey, like, some teams are good on KenPom or this site or whatever, and like in the metrics, but how does that actually compare? And like, what does that mean going forward? So I think it's a good look.
So just, I guess, give us a sense then when you say that you are comparing, and you're sort of collecting data to compare it with consensus rankings. What exactly does that, like, what does that process look like? How do you're using CBB Analytics and you're just scanning all of their data, but don't all these other people have the same data and access to the same data?
Yeah, so every site that puts out metrics is going to be a little different in what their formulas truly are. Like, no one knows the exact KenPom formula, obviously, because then his business wouldn't be as unique and he would be toast. But so every site is a little different. Like, you'll see BYU might be higher on some sites, and just random spitball, and St. Mary's might be lower on some sites. But it's a general idea. Like you're saying, all these sites are going to be very similar because the numbers aren't going to lie. Even if you deviate one part of a formula different than another, or you weight certain things, it's not going to fluctuate from KenPom to CBB Analytics to Evan Mia to Bart Torvik like that much. But the power rankings do, because my power rankings, if Gonzaga loses twice this week, I'm dropping their ass out. And CBB Analytics is not going to do that because they don't just look at them and say there's no way they're a top 30 team, but I do. So that's like the biggest difference, I think.
Right. So you're kind of adding in that human element and analysis that, I guess, for you is rooted in a lot of experience as well, right?
Yeah, I think I'd like to trust my gut. Let's be honest though, when the bracket comes out in March, I go with the gut calls, and half the time they're wrong, and I'm like, whatever, what the fuck. But I try to, and I think that's what genuine power rankings are. And you see that in every sport. You see NFL power rankings every week during the season, and MLB and NBA, et cetera, throughout the entire year. But there really aren't, like in college basketball, I think it is consensusly using, the whole entire industry uses analytics and numbers more than any other sport. NFL is probably, there's a deeper layer to it, but for the general people and the general public and the common fan, I don't know of a sport that uses the metrics like this as much and considers it because of KenPom and stuff like that. So I think it's really good to basically give people every ounce of it to let them know what's going on. So
I've noticed on a lot of your social media that you also do a fair amount of traveling. Like, you're getting out to games, you're watching a lot of games in person. How does that influence your work here when you're creating these power rankings?
yeah, I'm trying something that I wanted to do different this year, and take things to the next level, and next year it'll be even more. You really get a better feel for on all different levels. Like just being there in general as a fan is enjoyable. Like I was at Baylor this past weekend and brand new stadium, like the vibes down there. I'm from New Jersey. Going to Waco, Texas is a different world. So I loved it. It was so much fun. But then also like evaluating teams and how they're going to be and how my gut, like I talk about gut check and gut feeling on those teams are going to be for the tournament and postseason, and even players for the NBA draft. And even if it is just trusting a certain player in the tournament, like this past weekend, the Houston Baylor game I was at, Jamal Shed, I've known he's amazing. He's that dude. He's one of the best players in the country. But I would trust him with my life in his hands, like without a doubt, especially after seeing him and them play. So little things like that kind of push me one way or another. I try not to bias it too much based on where I was, because like I've been to Baylor, but I haven't been to Duke and I haven't been to Illinois. So I try to keep it as just as I can. But some games, obviously, like a Baylor Houston game, is next level. So you take that into consideration.
Yeah, that makes sense. But that's pretty cool that you're getting out there and you're kind of seeing things for yourself. So, we got to ask you, we're a community of sports bettors. We bet on sports pretty regularly, especially college basketball at this time of year. Do you bet on sports? And what does your sports betting look like?
I dabble. I used to more, but I just I never want to half-ass it. So I think my time and like my mental capacity just are occupied by other things. So during the tournament, maybe I'll throw some bets out there and stuff like that. And I'm always looking at lines also and understanding those kinds of things, because it definitely helps you try to realize if I'm missing something or like what to expect in games and whatnot. So I'm always paying attention to that stuff, even if I'm not actively wagering. But it's a seldom experience now, I'd say.
So not all the time. So what do you hope to do with your data then? Like what do you hope kind of comes with all of this stuff that you're collecting?
Yeah. I think it's just interesting. Like I said, I don't think this happens in any other sport like this, and I think that's super intriguing to be able to visualize 363 teams on a one piece of paper or one sheet, virtual sheet, and just be able to look at it and understand more without even watching a game. I'm not just a stat nerd. I'm big on the eye test and like Hooper or whatever, that kind of thing, because that's like the bus meme where you have like one person on this side of the spectrum, one person on the other. And they kind of never agree. I try to find the middle ground in that, but I just think it's really interesting, one. And then two, I know that people bet and I know that people gamble, and I know that people just like to understand also going into games. Like if people are watching Duke Carolina next weekend or this weekend, Gonzaga St. Mary's, and like they just want to know what to expect. So I do a lot of breakdowns and previews of stuff like that of, hey, like Gonzaga plays really fast and St. Mary's plays really slow. And on the road, Gonzaga does this, and this is what you should expect in that game. So little things like that I think, like I said, I understand that gamblers and bettors love that stuff like y'all, because it makes sense. Why wouldn't you? Like this stuff has actual contextual evidence and from the last few years and from even the last 10 to 20 years as to why it works. It's kind of like evidence of itself, but there's a lot of different reasons. I also just enjoy it. It's just fun to look at things in a different scope. So,
Pace, will you be building your brackets ahead of the tournament based on Ryan's data and research and some of the work?
Perfect brackets don't exist, right? So it's one of these things where like we're just taught to fail in that space, no matter what we do. But what I can say, and I can kind of bridge the betting stuff a little bit with the content that you've produced, Ryan, is like when I've come across things, the visuals are so powerful, because when you do have like some of your XY 4-quadrant graphs that will plot things based on pace of play, but also based on the wins that are produced by that team. Those visuals are really powerful for a betting group like ourselves, because we can then quickly identify a team that is less or more likely to score more or less points in a significant part of the game that could present potential value based on the way that game's actually trending and the way that team's sort of playing. So as we move into like conference tournament week, we're going to be referencing some of the stuff that you've put forward for sure. So I feel like it's almost like a preemptive thank you, because we haven't really used it much yet. But I know that as we get down the stretch here, we're going to be looking at some of that stuff. I definitely noticed that a lot of the stuff that you put forward there is let's call it defense positive. So the teams that are ranked higher in the power rankings that you put further down are the fast-paced teams, and you really seems like you really you kind of lean defense when it comes to your rankings. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think we talked about it before the show. My whatever it's called bio says like defense appreciator, which is very much true. I appreciate a good defense. It's funny, I don't like consciously do that. I don't just be like, oh yeah, Alabama plays way too fast and they're way too good on offense to me to rank them too high. They win games, like I don't really care, and if they look good, which teams like Alabama and Arizona for the most part and Kentucky do, I just know that historically there's much higher success rate with those teams that have a better defense. And Arizona lost to Princeton last year, and they were one of those teams in the top right quadrant, really good and really high pace and a lot of possessions. And the problem is with those teams is that at some point, like they could play 4 teams that play at a high pace also, and they're just better, and they're going to kick their ass and kick them to the curb and go to the Final Four. But the problem is that when you play a team that does the exact opposite, then the game it leans it favors the other team, your opponent, especially in an upset, because if you're used to playing whatever, I'll call it 100 possessions in a game, and then you play against St. Mary's who plays in half that, you now have to focus more on offense, and each possession means so much more, which you're not used to. And then if you get behind it all, you're kind of screwed at that point. And that's why Houston is so good. And I mentioned St. Mary's. That's why they've been so good. And Dayton's been so good this year. And that's why Arizona lost to Princeton last year. And that's why Princeton beat Missouri last year. And it happens to a lot of teams. And that's why Alabama lost to San Diego State. They weren't able to play their comfortable game in the Sweet 16 last year. So it's more of like a historical understanding of, hey, like these teams tend to flop at some point. Now, that being said, teams like Gonzaga in 2021, when they lost to Baylor in the title game, they were all the way in the top right, well past where Arizona is, but they also did it at a much higher rating and I think much better effectiveness. So that kind of speaks to that. But teams will succeed and they will win by doing that. I just think there's a lower floor, I guess we'll say, in postseason play.
So Ryan, with this visual up right here with the trapezoid of excellence, knowing that a bunch of our listeners are not viewing this, can you try to walk us through this a little bit and what it means? And then I know you're not a big bettor yourself, but then just maybe from a betting standpoint, not necessarily giving advice, but just, giving the data associated with it.
Yeah, for sure. So the Trapezoid of Excellence has taken off this year in terms of popularity. People hit me all the time like, oh, when's the next Trapezoid of Excellence? And I was like, holy shit, what did I do to myself? Like, because if it flops, which is not going to flop, like it's based on historical stuff, I'm confident in it. If it flops, my reputation down the drain. But it basically goes pace, horizontal, and adjusted net rating, which is basically just like efficiency and overall efficiency on the website going vertical. The further right, the more possessions you play, the higher pace, like Arizona that I mentioned, and the further left, the exact opposite, where Houston and St. Mary's are, and a bunch of teams like that. So the reason why there's a trapezoid of excellence in the middle and not in the top right or the top left really is because teams that win national championships and also teams that tend to make runs that you didn't expect tend to not play too fast or too slow and also at a higher rating, because like we're saying, if you can play both speeds, right, both ways, and adapt to your opponent and be able to change things and be comfortable in different situations, unlike Arizona and Alabama and Kentucky are, in my opinion, and the numbers will support that, then you have a better chance of winning. And so UConn last year, Baylor in 21, Virginia was a little bit more towards where Houston is, which is still okay. Those teams tend to be not all the way fast or all the way slow, but towards the middle to be able to do those things. And the reason I have to explain to a lot of people why it's a trapezoid is because, right, like if you play super fast like Arizona, for people that can see this right now, they're at a very, very good rating, like one of the best in the country. It looks like maybe like third or fourth best, something like that. But you need to be like where Houston is in terms of adjusted net rating to be able to play that slow and be able to win a national title. And that's where Virginia was, so if you play really, really fast, you have to play even at an even better rating is what I'm trying to say, because you have to really be able to kick everyone's ass no matter what they're going to throw at you. So that's why it's a trapezoid. And the biggest way that I tell people to use this is not to live and die by this, because it's not that simple. But if you are deciding between a couple national champions, and say you like Purdue and you like Kentucky and you like, I don't know, Houston, like this might say, okay, go with Purdue. And if you really don't know who to go with, and also finding the differences in matchups is the biggest thing, especially in the early rounds. So hard to see all the different teams here, I probably should have focused some smaller quantity, and I will as the tournament comes closer and when the tournament's here, obviously. But if Arizona or Alabama that play super, super fast, I think I just mentioned it. If they play against like St. Mary's, or if they play, I think Vermont's down there towards the slow end, or Princeton in the first or second round, those teams that play at a very slow pace at a high rating can easily just make Alabama or Arizona uncomfortable and play a game that's 30-28 instead of 50-45 at halftime. And then all of a sudden, Arizona and Alabama are scrambling at halftime, trying to figure out what to do. And if they're playing from behind in a slow crunch game where Princeton's taking every second of the shot clock, those are the things I look for. And I kind of rambled on for a bit, but finding the differences with real contextual evidence as to like what you can see happening. Okay, this can definitely happen. And there's such opposites that this is a good opportunity for an upset, even though it might not happen.
I think from a betting standpoint, I'm going to kind of bridge the gap a little bit here, because the way we wager at In Play Live, which obviously many of our listeners know about, is we like to actually identify some of these discrepancies as they're happening in real time. So, you might get 4 or 5 examples similar to what you just mentioned there, where the public actually isn't surprised and potentially that big favorite or that big school does run away with the game. But the one that doesn't, then seeing that in real time and then being able to go, hey, we saw this chart. We saw this team that plays at a very different pace than Alabama or Arizona. Because of that information, we know that they're pretty uncomfortable right now, and this game has become a struggle. You might be able to get a live spread that underdog could cover that has some theoretical value on it, and you might even be able to get a money line or an underdog upset, which I know we got a few of in the tournament last year that really, really went well for us. And the flip side to that is a school that has that sort of that Cinderella run that we tend to see. The public actually tends to get burnt by those teams more than any other teams, even though they're the public's favorite story. And the reason for that is because the first time they won, they cost the public money by upsetting the favorite. The second time they won, the public tends to not believe that they can do it again. And then by the time we get to that third round is when the public is like, the big Cinderella story, maybe they win that third game and the public actually did well on it. And then, if not, they lose again on them. And then of course, after that, they tend to derail because they actually aren't teams that will be in that trapezoid itself. They tend to, make it to maybe a Sweet 16, maybe an Elite 8, and then they can really get the doors blown off once they get in that position, which obviously we've seen kind of year in, year out. But visually speaking, seeing this and then kind of parlaying that with real-time situations from a betting standpoint, as we always say on the show, information is power. So I love this stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, people love this graph and they love the trapezoid of excellence. I've had told a million times, hey, gotta make it. Give me a T-shirt or something with that on it. I'm like, I don't really know if that's gonna happen, but okay.
I've got to ask you, Ryan, because I know before we started the show here, and some of your handles on social there, you describe yourself as a advocate for defense, or a guy who really appreciates defense. And so when we talk about the fast-paced school, like in Arizona, for example, matching up with a much slower-paced school, why is it that the faster-paced team is the one that's uncomfortable? Why is it not the slower-paced team that is the one uncomfortable? I guess why is the fast-paced team at the disadvantage?
Yeah, I think there are teams. I will preface and say that there are fast-paced teams that don't get put out of their pace, right? So Gonzaga in 2021 was one of those teams. That's how they got the national title game and almost won, even though Baylor was amazing. Like if a team like St. Mary, they came up against a team like that of this year's team, they would blow them out of the water because they were so effing good at it. But in a vacuum, and most of the time, it's because they're used to playing so many possessions, so they don't have to shoot at as higher field goal percentages, and then they make teams that kind of play in the middle of pace and at a regular pace in different styles. They make them uncomfortable because they have to just keep up. But if you play against a team like Dayton or St. Mary's, are good. I keep referencing them because we're looking at the graph, right? But those are two efficient offenses also, and so is Princeton, right? So Dayton, great example. They have a good defense and a great offense by the metrics and efficiencies, and they make every possession count. Where Arizona and Alabama, for the most part, like it kind of fluctuates. In some games, like when Alabama played Kentucky, they didn't make every possession count because they just had to play keep up and just go, go, go. And if they're missing, they're like, okay, it's okay. We're going to have many more possessions in the game, where Dayton almost values each possession more, if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of what it knuckles down to. And only when Dayton starts off with a lead, or a team like Dayton, if they play Arizona and they start off, they're up 20-10, and then Arizona gets lost, and then they start really scrambling, and every possession means even more an incremental level because they're losing, and they really have to start hitting at a higher rate because Dayton's going to take all 30 seconds of every shot clock at that point.
All right, so really interesting how you kind of put that together there, in the sense that a team like Dayton values its possessions so much more and is more effective with those possessions. And then another team, perhaps like Arizona, for example, that maybe doesn't value its possessions as much. And I guess that's something that sort of becomes kind of culturally ingrained in the schools themselves, and thus making it hard to kind of break out of that pattern when put on in the moment and on the spot.
Yeah, they're kind of just so used to go, especially in the Pac-12. Arizona is just a great example because it is such an offensive powered conference, and it's a conference that's heavy weighted at the top by Arizona. While Zoo has been playing a lot better, who they did sweep Arizona, but realistically, there's not a lot of good teams. So you kind of have to, teams that are that much worse in the Pac-12 play end up just tailoring to whatever Arizona wants to do all year. And that's what those teams like to do also. And they know that from years past. So when you get a team from a conference that doesn't play like that, like Houston, and those teams over there, and in the A10 with Dayton, that's a team that they never reside to letting teams kind of run them at the gym like that. So
yeah, pace of play is such a big part of what we do at In Play Live and betting on sports live. I mean, such valuable knowledge to know ahead of time, to look at a matchup and say, hey, we've got Dayton against Arizona, for example, and this is going to be a clash of matchups when it comes to pace. And we can, based on what Ryan's telling us, expect, or perhaps, project that the defense is going to win out over time in a game.
Yeah, or at least just welcome the chaos of it all, right? Where you just kind of appreciate it as it's unfolding, and information's power, data is power. So all of this can just go into the bank, help you make better decisions long term when it comes to this kind of stuff. But Ryan, I will say, like, it would be great to have you to come back on to do an "I told you so" moment with the Trapezoid of Excellence, should it come into fruition. But from the standpoint of the public, so not the bettors, and all the brackets. I know you said don't follow me for the brackets, but using some of that data, what would be your big advice piece to everyone that is filling those out in the next month here, when it comes to some of that data that you're seeing?
Yeah, I think, and it goes back to the betting thing also. I was thinking about it before, where finding value is important, and value in terms of, especially in the tournament, people think of huge underdogs and whatever. If you're talking money line +3, +4, +500, 600 odds, even bigger for the higher seeds, obviously. And I think if you hit one or two of those, even if you try on 5 or 6, it's okay if you get them. If you don't get the other ones so wrong in the other regions and stuff like that, I just think where you see an opportunity and there's value, even if it's still less than a 50% chance of likelihood happening, I think you take it. So an example might be, if I think I'm going to draw up some random bracket in my head, and we're the same teams we keep talking about because they're on my mind. If you have Arizona and then you have Dayton versus St. Mary's right here, and then whatever, like if you think, hey, like St. Mary's is the underdog against Dayton and they would be against Arizona, but I don't see Arizona getting past that Sweet 16 point here, whoever they might play after that. So that's a really good, and also the matchup makes sense for one of these two teams like St. Mary's to be able to beat Dayton, and they match up well against Arizona. So almost like picking and choosing your upset battles and your value picks based on where you see those top teams kind of falling. Where Purdue last year, I think I took Memphis to go to the Elite Eight or Final Four because I was like, damn, Memphis FAU is a toss up, but I like whoever gets out of there to beat Purdue. They didn't have to play Purdue, but I still would have taken them even if I knew that Purdue was definitely going to win, because I saw that opportunity. Said, I don't think Purdue is going to go that far, so let me pick a flyer here because I do like these teams also next to them. So that's my biggest suggestion. And then also don't just stare at numbers and be like, yeah, like this guy Ryan Hammer says that these teams are going to be good at this. Like do not do that. I will fill out a bracket. It's usually decent enough, and I have some picks that I get excited about and all, but I never win my bracket group because you don't need to know anything to win a bracket group. So stick with your gut, and also pick teams. This sounds real stupid. I do it all the time. pick teams that you want to root for. Like, I enjoy watching Houston play, so I might pick Houston to win a national championship or go to the Final Four. I don't enjoy. I don't know. There's not many teams I don't enjoy, but I'm a Maryland fan. I don't enjoy Maryland. If Maryland was in the tournament, I wouldn't pick them because they make me sad. But that's the thing. If you feel passionate about teams and you want to see them win, on top of being confident in them because of X, Y, Z, then roll with those kind of teams. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I also think too that some of the points that you made could actually transition really well into what I would call the most underrated part of March Madness, and that it's the conference tournaments before the tournament. There's nothing like that week or 2 weeks with counting some of the smaller divisions, and watching them fight for that only spot to get in the tournament, right? And how exciting that can be. And obviously it's a little bit more volume. So from a betting standpoint, we're always looking for volume, and the tournament is actually when a lot of the it's interesting. It's when the public gets most excited, and it's when the volume actually decreases. So, yeah,
for sure. And I think it's funny that in terms of betting, especially and making picks, the conference tournaments are probably the hardest thing to do, in my opinion, because there's not as much research that goes into it as the NCAA tournament, because that's obviously the big dog, the big whale, the dance, whatever. But also there's not as much historical evidence as to runs and whatever and upsets in the conference tournaments, because, like, I don't know, Texas A&M, who's struggling in SEC play and they've been struggling all year, they're a good team, and they, like, everyone, I might think, hey, like, they're good, they can easily beat on Alabama and then beat a Tennessee and make a run to the SEC tournament final, because of whatever reason I like them in the NCAA tournament if they get there. But then all of a sudden, like, I don't know, Ole Miss or Missouri comes out of the depths of the waters, and that stuff just happens. It happened with Georgetown in the Big East a couple of years ago, and not a single soul saw it happening. Oregon State in the Pac-12 tournament. It's just not the same statistical evidence and proof throughout the year, because they've been playing these teams all season long, and now all of a sudden it happens. So, like, it just it's mind-boggling almost. And so I put less value into my picks for those than I do for the tournament, for sure.
Cool. Good to know.
Yeah. Ryan Hammer, that's at Ryan Hammer 09 on X and Ryan Hammer 9 on Instagram. Any other socials you want to give a shout out to or
No, mention? You're good. If people search my name, they should be able to find it. I'm not worried.
There you go. He's an easy guy to find. Certified bracketologist. I look forward to using the Trapezoid of Excellence as I build my brackets this year, for sure.
Of course. Yeah. I appreciate y'all having me on.
All right. Take care. All right, Pace. So that was Ryan Hammer. I am honest when I say I think I might just use that Trapezoid of Excellence when I build my next bracket. I mean, it looks really cool, and I think he's onto something.
Yeah, the more we know about teams' tendencies and patterns, and, like, if I actually think back to last year's tournament, some of the things that we were doing live, especially with UConn's run, where they put us in this position over and over again, and then we hit these wagers on them over and over again. We are identifying these things to an extent, but this gives you that much more confidence when you're seeing it unfold, which is tremendous. Also, I think with college basketball in particular, you do have hundreds of teams, so it can get a little messy. It can get a little chaotic. A bunch of teams come through the menu, and you might not have a bunch of information on that particular team. And sometimes these visuals can help, especially if you zoom in a little bit and can get some of those clumps a little bit more separated, so that you can actually see which team is which. So yeah, great stuff, and looking forward to the future with respect to those types of things.
Yeah, as you get, touching on the whole clash of styles, fast-paced versus slow-paced team, it's the kind of thing where it's like, you know what? If I see that, now I can go and look at the Trapezoid, then look at the schedule of games, right? And sort of see, like, or do we have any of these major clashes taking place? And then, maybe circle them and say, okay, well, now, let's watch the game live and see how it develops. And is it playing into what he suggested, where the slower paced team is likely, or perhaps has a higher percentage chance of prevailing in imposing their style of play on the game. And if that's the case, and you are seeing it, well then, geez, now it gives you, like you said, that much more confidence to place the wager on the game if it is fitting into our strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And also just from a recreational standpoint, like, maybe you shouldn't take, whatever team to win March Madness, based on looking at some of that stuff and to win your bracket. It can, I think brackets are impossible, but it can help you actually get closer to the right team at the end of the whole thing. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Really glad to have Ryan on the show, and I think he provided us with a lot of information, and I definitely plan to look at more of his stuff on social media as we sort of make our way through this month of March. Very exciting times, and also helping us along the way, we'll have OddsJam up during streams and throughout. And if people want a promo code, we have a promo code for people that are part of InPlay Live already to sign up for OddsJam, right?
Yeah. Just fire in that code InPlay Live for 35% off your first month, or InPlay Live 15 for 15% off in perpetuity.
Yeah, helps you really identify the weak lines that are out there across the books, and helps make your decisions a little bit easier, especially if you've already said, "Oh, I really want to bet this." Well, who's offering the best line? Who's offering the best odds? Make it all right there in front of you. It makes life that much easier as you bet live. All right. Well, with that pace, I think that's another show in the books. Looking forward to talking a lot more about college basketball as we progress through this next month.
Cheers, buddy.
All right. Keep beating those books. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Behind the Lines. Remember to like, download, and subscribe. We are on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and everywhere you get your podcasts. Have a betting story or want to be featured on our podcast? Drop a note in the comments below. And if you want to join InPlay Live, use promo code Behind the Lines.